It's Friday here and in Poland. My name is Editor. My name is Editor.
News editor.
I'm filling in today for your usual host, Brian Francis, contributing editor to Gamasutra.com. My name is Alex Waro, also known as an editor of Gamasutra, and I am joined by Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra.com.
Hi, it's me, and he is correct. I'm Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra.
And that's him down there in the lower right window. What I'm going to try and work on getting in the lower right window is our very special guest. A very special guest. Would you tell the fine folks who you are and what you do?
Hi, my name is Rafal, and I'm the brand manager for Bloober Team, the guys who created Observer and earlier Layers of Fear, which some of you might know.
Nice. All right, so we should have Observer here on the stream. And I think, Chris, you and Brian played this before, right?
Yeah, we did actually. We played the beginning, and I think we're going to go through it again actually. But now we have an expert on, so there's definitely some of that cyberpunk aesthetic that we all like. And we're going to talk about that a bit here as well.
I love cyberpunk. I hate scary games. I really don't like them. But Brian's out today, so I'm going to play one instead.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about that, Rafal. Before we get to that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in game development, and your history with Bloober Team?
Sure. I came to the video game industry around 2.5 years ago. Before that, I was a gaming journalist for 2 years, writing for this very small Polish indie web portal. But yeah, from there I got to Bloober Team, and I came into the company while they were slowly finishing up Layers of Fear to enter early access. So I've been with the team from that point, which was I believe June 2015. I was in the office itself, so I moved to Krakow. I'm not from Krakow, but I moved there to join the company. And earlier, I had a few run-ins with them, so I've been working with them on various things as a contractor. So then I moved to the company, and I've been with them since.
Okay, so you started out as a game journalist first, so that's interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Like looking, through the other side of the mirror, like for everything, I would be a totally different journalist right now, knowing how games are made from the backbone, like how everything looks from the other side. It's like very interesting for me, like how my world views on that changed.
Okay, can we just talk about that for a minute? Like,
I was going to say, let's do that.
Rafael, did you think making games would be easier or harder than it turned out to be?
I would say more chaotic. Like I always believe that making games is very hard. Like it's not a single person effort for most of the time. Like we're not talking, very small indies here. We're talking, even indie titles, but 10 or 12 people, let's say. It's like 12 people that have to be constantly working together, share ideas, find compromises, and then change everything that they have in their minds to a piece of code and, a piece of levels and everything that will work together to get this very cool final outcome. So I always believed it was very hard, but being on this side of production, you see how it all works, how people connect with each other, how they talk with each other, like the stress of deadlines, of milestones, but also having the free roam of doing basically whatever you want and you feel. So it's something that I'm very proud of, like working in Bloober. So we have a vision for a horror that basically none other company does right now, at least to the extent that we are doing it. So from our perspective, we are doing something very cool and very neat, something that we always wanted to do. So that's really cool, and not all of the companies can do that. So I believe we're very lucky. Yeah.
Nice.
It's just funny because I think both Alex and I just kind of our ears kind of perked when you're talking about when you move on to the game dev side, and then you realize just how, like you said, how chaotic this actually is. I mean, that's kind of why. I've never, and I don't plan to pursue a career in actual game development. I've talked to too many developers over my past decade plus of doing this. It just seems so difficult. So and I'm just it just stresses me out sometimes just talking to people about it. So that's cool. Yeah.
It's not chaotic bad. It's like just chaotic. Like you have to find yourself in all of that, and know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you have to ask someone, because if you screw up, then like a lot of people will have to cover for you.
Yeah.
So having that knowledge that you are not alone, and your ideas are not always the best, and like working in a creative industry is like talking to people mostly, like figuring out what is the best idea of all of those great ideas that are on the table right now. So that's really cool, like seeing creative people working and figuring out things, and also finding compromises, which is always hard. And each game created is like our lead designer actually for Observer, his name is Wojtek Jejko. He actually has a saying that you never finish up games, you just leave them. Like you can always add something up and polish it like a never-ending story. So at one time you just have to let it go, like, okay, this is the best what we can do in this amount of time or in this budget, or basically it's the time to end it because we are overthinking everything. So let's just finish it, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a common story, and that's something I think all developers, even like not just game developers, just people who create something. There is that like no game's ever done. You just end up shipping it or something like that, and there's definitely some developers I've talked to who have had a problem letting it go, and then like a year and a half later there's like, I can still add something else to it or do this to it. At what point did Bloober Team what's that criteria for it being like, okay, it's we're gonna let this go now?
Like aside from the obvious one, which is thinking about budget-wise and money-wise, like how much we have put into the project, and how much we think we're gonna earn from the project. Like putting that aside, which is always the most important thing. Like we still have to earn from the game. Like if you want to do the next game, or at least eat something the next day,
it's good to eat something.
Yeah, definitely. So the game has to earn for itself. But aside that, like it's a common story, so I don't think we want to go there in this interview. However, aside from that, like it's more of a gut feeling, I'd say. Like the game design documents are done. We have the script ready. We have the full knowledge of what we want to do in the game. But at one point, like for instance, you're working at a environment for a room or whatnot, like, and you're seeing all these very small, tiny details that you can change, and you basically stop when you figure out that you are changing one pixel to another, and that's probably bad, and no one will see the difference, and you have to move on, do another stuff.
Yeah,
so basically,
it's kind of like
the game ends when it feels like a full product. Then it gets a little bit polishing to be complete in a way, or at least feel very comprehensive together. And at that point, you're probably done. A lot of people, and probably including us, but it's very hard to, figure when that moment exactly hits. Basically, everything you've done you do to the game outside of that point, like when you move through it, then probably the end user, the consumer, will not find a difference.
Yeah.
Like you will see the difference as a developer because you know what you changed and what you're doing. But for the consumer, like the player, he probably wouldn't feel the difference, even if he knew like what has changed.
Yeah. It's kind of like a diminishing returns scenario going on.
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah. So let's talk about the game itself a little bit. So Alex, he's
I'm so uncomfortable, you guys. It's a bad place.
Well, reiterate that Alex he's scared of the dark and things. So you're kind of doing some detective work here.
Yeah. That's I am honestly not sure what's going on. For those who haven't been keeping track of what's going on in this thing or didn't watch last time's stream, I guess the conceit of this game, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you are Rutger Hauer basically. And you are some kind of like mind police, and I got a weird message from someone who claims to be my son, and I'm trying to track down this person, but now I'm stuck in this apartment block because the security system activated, and I'm really scared because it's really scary.
Don't be scared, Alex. So what was the inspiration behind the game? I mean, obviously there's like cyberpunk vibes going on here. Can you talk a little bit about how the idea even initially came to be?
Sure. When we are finishing up Layers of Fear, and I mean going from the early access to the full release, we already started thinking about our next project, and one of the ideas was to change this setting as much as we can in a way, like to do something else and maybe not exactly connected to horror. Like we wanted to explore some other environments. So we took that task to our main writer on Layers of Fear, which his name is Andrzej Mądrzak, which is a pain to pronounce for anyone outside of Poland. But yeah. The guy said, okay, I'm gonna write a few things up and gonna see where it leads. So he came back to the office a week ago. I believe it was around December 2015 or so. Mm-hmm. And he was like, okay, I have two scripts. They're completely different. It was a page or page and a half for each story, just a very small gist of an idea. And I don't remember the other one, but the first one was basically cyberpunk horror. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that idea actually stuck in the game. The plot was, meant to be in an old tenement building, so it basically got to the end game and so on. And he gave us the script. We were in a meeting, a few people that were running the projects in the company. So they went through it, and there was okay, we're doing this. Mm-hmm. We love the idea, cyberpunk horror. Wow, let's do it. No one has done it in the extent that we were thinking about it. Focusing more on that horror, but leaving the cyberpunk in it as a very huge part of the game. And that was the moment that we started conceptualizing everything very slowly at first, because we were still finishing up Layers of Fear, obviously. But the initial work started, so we started thinking about what we can do, what we can be inspired by in the game. But as I said, it was one idea on the table, two ideas on the table, and one of them were okay, yeah, we can start talking about it. We have a winner now. So it was really, really cool. And, going into the project, watching all over again, the first Blade Runner, all of the 90s animes, playing some pen and paper RPG sessions in, Cyberpunk 2020, going through a shitload of comic books and, all of that, everything connected to Cyberpunk, basically. So it was a really cool ride for us. And one of the ideas that we had at the very beginning of that game is to basically how we want to establish our world, how we want it to be different from the American, cyberpunk or the Japanese cyberpunk. So it was like a no-brainer for us to bring it to the central part of Europe, like thinking about how our world looked like in the 80s, the beginning of 90s when cyberpunk was huge around the world. So it was our point of origin about thinking about the whole game. And then was the moment when we figure out, cyberpunk is about huge corporations. So obviously we had one in the game, which is Chiron, and they are ruling the world. So we added a Soviet time propaganda that was close to our history, and also that was the moment when we figured out we want to do something more retro, like to make a huge homage to the golden times of cyberpunk. And I believe it worked out well.
It does, and it's interesting hearing you talk about. So, like, you immerse yourself in kind of the American cyberpunk, the Japanese cyberpunk, that kind of aesthetic, and the kind of the tropes in those, kind of genres of a genre. But now it has me thinking: are there really that many like Polish cyberpunk stories out there? Because like you kind of like injected the culture, like your culture into this genre.
Yeah, like there's at least a few good books on the verge of cyberpunk and science fiction from Polish authors. Mm-hmm. But most of all, what we were thinking about is like how we can incorporate our culture, pop culture, and our history as small, ideas that will make the game whole, as in a sense. So I remember at one point we were discussing whether doing all those influences in the game will make it hard to understand for a Western audience. And basically that was also the moment when we figured out that for a lot of people it will be aesthetics. Like they won't see those things, but it will be different for them. It will feel different. Like in the game right now, you see all this kitchen furniture, right? Whatever you see this, like almost every household in Poland in the 80s had something that looked like 90% or even 100% like that. Like that was the furniture that we had in Poland. So like right now, even if we go to our grandparents or whatnot, we might find in their homes the same furniture that we have here in the game. So there's a lot of these small things that the Western audience doesn't even know. There are references to culture and history, but that was part of the idea. Like we wanted to people from our part to find all of those Easter eggs of some sorts or world building elements, and for all other people, from those who don't want to delve into figure out how level design was made or how everything worked out. They just wanted to play the game, so it was something they know, something similar to their world, but a little bit different. So that was our aim when it came to Observer.
Yeah, you can feel that too. I mean, when I was going through it, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it's like, of course, like this is kind of like what you said, the Central European, imagining of a common genre. So from a promotional standpoint, I imagine that you had, as brand manager, and you did marketing for the game and whatnot. Maybe you could comment on this, but Bloober has called this genre kind of like this is in like a subgenre of the horror genre. I'm saying genre over and over again, and you call it hidden horror. What is that?
Yeah. Like when we are figuring how we want to make horror is like we didn't want to focus on action. Like there were a lot of action horror oriented games. Some of the classics are action, like Resident Evil. Some recent titles like The Evil Within. Even games like kind of like Outlast, which is survival horror. It's also very action oriented because you have to run away from enemies. You have to be constantly vigilant. So what we want to do is we wanted to go back to psychological horror, thinking about what people feel while playing horror and what makes horror interesting. So we were thinking about that. We made Layers of Fear in that sense. So the initial idea behind Layers of Fear was to establish and the feeling of unknown. Like we have been changing the surroundings all over the player. So just so to make him, not know what's coming next. So like scientifically, like the people are most afraid of the unknown. Like that's scientifically proven. So whatever you don't know what's coming, your imagination will work, and you will fill in the blanks. So that was the idea behind Layers of Fear, and we were thinking more on that. So what we came up is what we call, as you said, hidden horror. So basically, hidden horror has two principles to it. One is that it has to have a subject that is meaningful in some way. So like psychological in nature or even philosophical. So in Layers of Fear, it was obviously the choice between your life as a working person, like your job is more important to you, or is your family more important to you? That were the two clashing ideas. And and we gave that subject to the players, and their role while playing the game was basically put themselves on one or the other side, and if they couldn't choose, they got stuck in this madness loop. So there were three endings in Layers of Fear that responded to that. So basically, that's what we want to do. So we have a subject that's meaningful. With Observer, it was the boundaries of humanity, so a very broad subject. But then again, because of that, we could, throw all of those sociological. Hate to pronounce that.
Something like I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem.
We know what you mean.
So yeah, we could roll all of that into the game, and talk a lot of those subjects that are important to people right now. But the other part of hidden horror is basically something that we called catharsis 2.0, and catharsis is the feeling of relief. So you play horror just to be scared, and at one point, face those fears, and basically, everything vanishes. You are a stronger person. You face your fears. You get relief. So what, in our idea, what we wanted to add to that is to not only relieve our fears or our tensions, but also to kind of go into the emotions and how we as people think about the world. So that Catharsis 2.0 at the very end of the game, or basically while you play and have the time to think about the game, is to make the players think about how would they behave in being in such situations that we put the players in. I won't spoil Observer because some of you maybe didn't have the chance to play or see any streams. But there are moments in the game that they are kind of very morally not right in some sense. But then again, there's a lot. There's nothing is black and white, right? So there are those shades of gray, and something that you potentially think is very bad, the longer you start to think about it and the more context you get to know while playing the game, you kind of start thinking maybe it wasn't all that morally such a morally bad decision, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to give those kind of feelings and experiences to the players. So at the end of the day, they can actually figure something more about themselves. Like, how would they behave in such situations? Maybe they are more able to find themselves and look at their lives from a different perspective, something that they have never seen or imagined, putting themselves in. So that's basically what we want to do, and we call it hidden horror.
Yeah. Some of the things that you were saying, obviously, I mean, you were just talking earlier about how it's very story driven. I mean, a writer came up with the idea, and then development formed around that, which is interesting to hear. And some of the things that you're saying too about making the player think about themselves, being self-aware, kind of existential motivations. It also reminds me of I'm just gonna make up this term, the Thomas Grip frictional games school of game design, where it's about the unknown, and it's like about yourself and finding something out about yourself. It's not necessarily about fear, although fear comes along with the unknown. Is there some inspiration from frictional, for example? I'm just interested to. It sounds similar to me.
Yeah, definitely. Frictional games are always of interest to us. Like, we play them. We think they're really good games, and the guys know what they are doing, definitely. And I think they have a similar idea to what we do. Like, they also wanted to do more psychological games, and horror goes very well with psychology. It's I guess it's a kind of a natural connection. But yeah, definitely, we play their games, and it would be a lie if I would say their games don't influence us, because they do. But also tons of other games, Forbidden Siren, old GameCube horrors, Fatal Frame. Those were very cool horror games that had this psychological aspect to them. I won't go as far as Silent Hill 2, because it's the most prominent example of a kind of a psychological horror game. But yeah, definitely the guys have something similar with us. I
will say this with Layers of Fear, which scared the crap out of me. It's one of those games, if I just got off a tangent, it's just I'm not sure why it's scaring me. I mean, it's the level design. It just, like you were saying, it does the whole mental modeling thing where it's the fear of the unknown. So even though nothing happened, nothing quote unquote scary happened, but when I turned around, the entire shape of the room shifted. That kind of thing. That's what scares me. And with also with Observer, you do really interesting things. Or your studio does interesting things with the level design and the geometry and shifting all that around. Is that just going to be like a thematic thing with Bloober games now?
We are in Observer. We are definitely doing it to a less extent that we did that with Layers of Fear.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I will say it will stuck to us for a little while. We will try not to overuse it, because overusing anything makes it boring very fast. However, it's a great way to actually increase the tension. As I said earlier, having this the being scared of the unknown and not knowing what will come next. It's a huge fear factor, and if you know that the game can change in real time around you, basically at the moment's notice, and you just don't know when it will come. You will expect it to happen all the time. So in Observer, as I said, we are doing it to a much less extent. Basically, what we have in Observer is that we have those sections in the real world, and while hacking into other people's minds. So we try to make it to not overuse it, basically. But to answer your question, yes, I think this mechanic will stick with us for a little while. But we also know that we have to be very careful not to overuse it, so it doesn't get too boring. And we also need to figure out new ways to scare the players, right? We need to learn and evolve ourselves.
Yeah, it's definitely different in this game, and I'm just kind of laughing because I see where Alex is right now, and I know it comes up in maybe the next half hour where it just kind of is like, what? Anyway, I'll let Alex find out about that hopefully before our time's up. But yeah, so you work on more, at least on this project, the marketing and I think a little bit of the biz dev side and things like that. So selling a game like this, you're coming up with some terms that you can use to market: Catharsis 2.0, hidden horror. Those are some things that you can make turn into talking points when you're talking to people like us. What's the toughest part about marketing a game like this, though?
Well, I would say it's a tough one to answer in a straight sentence. Definitely one of the hardest things to portray in doing this kind of games is to make someone understand what is our point of view on horror. So we've been announcing that we are doing psychological horror and recently what evolved into hidden horror, and we've been very blunt about it. We've been talking to people around that. We've been communicating it with media all around the world. And then, I read a lot of articles that say that we are, it's a survival horror game. And I think that's the biggest challenge for us, because the market right now is so very dense when it comes to thinking about horror, that it's something different than, that it can be something different than survival horror. Yeah. I did a little study on that at one point, and I actually went to a very small research, because I went to Wikipedia, and I actually Googled horror, and it no game is labeled as, for instance, horror as horror. Most of the recent games, all of them basically are called survival horror games. Yeah. And some of them, they fall into that adventure horror category. So that would probably be frictional games. Yeah. So that kind of made us think at one point, so how come in the film industry you have slashers, you have body horror, you have psychological horror, you have all those genres that work together, and basically every fan of horror or thriller can find something that suits them. And in the video game industry, everything is put down into this one bag that's called survival horror. So we were trying to convey that message. We were talking to people, and a lot of people said, yeah, they're doing psychological horror games, and we were super happy about it. When people first started noticing that we definitely do something different, and that was very, very cool. And now more and more people start to talking about hidden horror as a genre, which makes us extremely happy, because I think that after Observer, people started noticing that horror can be a little different. So not to spoil the stream right now and to tell too much. However, I'm gonna say this one thing, that a lot of people I mean, very,
Yeah.
maybe not puzzled, but they were very happy that someone is doing a not straight in your face horror, I'd say. Like, Observer is about the greedy world, the tensions, the social tensions, the political tensions from time to time that are in the game. So basically, that's very hard life and the regular life of people that exist in the game and tell you their stories. Like, that's the place where real horror comes out. So we as people nowadays can imagine the world like in 50 or 60 years to look like that for various of reasons. Like, Observer is kind of a World War III, which we call the Great Decimation, and a huge pandemic, which is called the Nanophage. But basically, we can imagine the problems humanity can face in the recent years and how we can end up. And that's what's really scary about Observer. Like, and basically our mindset for the game. So we wanted to not scare the people with a monster that pops up in their head, but basically the aura and the atmosphere of the game and the vision of the future that we had. So conveying that was definitely the hardest part of what we wanted to do with marketing.
This right here is a really good vision of the future.
I see that you found the the retro game they include in there. Well, yeah, what's the deal with this? Can you give any background on this?
Yeah, sure. So there will be two stories here. So the first one is the game is called With Fire and Sword. So it basically translates to Ogniem i Mieczem, which is a Polish book, which is presumably one of the most important lectures in our culture and history. So it was a direct reference to that. But the second thing is, like, growing up in the beginning of 90s, like, almost no one had a PC, at their homes. So there was always this one scratch what doesn't fit. So a neighbor, a best friend, an aunt or uncle, that had a PC. So whenever you would go to them, they had probably one game there. A very simple puzzle game or a very simple platformer game. Like, consoles in Poland at the beginning of 90s were basically non-existent until the first PlayStation came, which was a huge success in Poland. But prior to that, like, there was Commodore, there was Atari.
Sure.
But, not too many people had that. And so the culture, like the gaming culture, basically from the first PCs in Poland. So, in Observer, when you go to other people's PCs, you find this one, simple retro game.
This is
and
excellent.
that's a direct reference to actually like what we grew up with as children here in Poland.
This is my kind of horror game. This is fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, Alex is just going to hang out in the retro game to
This is hard.
stay away from the horrors of the Polish cyberpunk future.
Yeah. Yeah, we should jump into chat real quick at this very convenient break point, which is Flipsider has been asking a couple questions, and I want to throw one out real quick. When we were talking about doing first-person horror and sort of the ins and outs of that, they asked, have you ever thought about doing like third-person horror? And I sort of wonder maybe if you could open up a bit about like what the challenges would be of going to third person and why you prefer working in first person. Cool.
We kind of discussed it in while talking on a different topic. So
it's all right. I was
what
scared.
we do is basically we change the environment around the player, right? Like in real time. So having a third person view and having a full, like, say, model of your character right in front of you will actually make it harder for us to change the environment around the player. Like, players will definitely see more of the changing going on than we have it from the first person view. So that's one of the reasons that we like to stick to that first person view. But also, it kind of gets more immersive when you're playing from the first person view. Like, Layers of Fear, the main protagonist was never named. Was presumably a famous artist, but you never could read anything real about his history or life. So a lot of people tended to like find either the
Yep.
That guy does that.
Creeper.
they try to connect it to someone they know, or they try to fill in that role themselves in a way. So basically, first person is way more immersive for a lot of people, and having that mechanic that I was talking about is also a huge and important role. Why we haven't, for instance, moved Observer to the first person camera view.
This guy has a really good Twitch setup. Have you seen this? He's got double mics. He's got a camera. He's got a second. This guy could really make a killing.
That guy could really stream some games. That's right. You okay there?
Yeah, I just this guy freaks me out. His face is weird, but in a really good cyberpunky horror way.
He's kind of got he got the kind of discount, the discounted enhancements. I think it's not the best, not the most convincing skin, but it works. It works for him.
He has very old implants, and there will be more about that character in the future, so I'm not spoiling too much. But suffice to say, he's actually played by one of the most famous Polish actors right now.
Oh, yeah.
The actor is called Arkadiusz Jakubik, and he's been playing a lot in Poland, and he's getting a lot of attention. Like, he's a star basically here. So
how
really
do you get connected with with big names like that?
Yeah, so we have been working with an agent that has been working in the film industry for a little while, so that helped us out secure the Polish actor. And when we started working on Observer, and we figured out that we want to do apart from a good cyberpunk and horror story, we wanted to be a little bit of a homage to the cyberpunk culture. So the first name that pops up, like, every time when you think homage and cyberpunk, it's like Roy Batty from Blade Runner. Mm-hmm. So the moment we figure out that we want to have Rutger Hauer in the game, it was like, we're gonna do whatever we can to find a contact to him and secure that deal. So we just found a contact to their agents. We called them that we want to meet, we want to make a game, and they were like, okay, let's see what Rutger says. And actually, Mr. Rutger Hauer is very cool about this whole idea, and he's very keen, and he invited us to Amsterdam to meet him, talk about the project before we even signed anything. So yeah, he was really, really cool about the project. I was very happy to do it. So yeah, like, I think it was like he also knew that the game, before he's seen it, he knew it will be a huge homage to Cyberpunk from what we have been telling him. And yeah, he was very keen to work on it. It's super cool.
Yeah. So back to some business stuff. Some business. Let's get down to business. Now, what's how many people are at Bloober? Was it 12? You said?
No.
Or
we have in production we have more than I believe more than 40 people right now.
Oh wow! Okay.
We're working on more than a single project at one time. Although at some points with Observer we've had like most of the team working on it. However, we're doing more than that, and we kind of expanded after Layers of Fear a little bit. A few new people came to the company, and we're growing. We're not growing fast, but also we don't want to overgrow.
Right.
Like, we believe it wouldn't help us, to be honest. So For most of the time, we have a core team around 20 people each working on a single project, and then we, swap people whenever they are needed to fill in the gaps, with assets, for instance. Like it's like the easiest thing to swap around the projects, like people doing
Yeah.
3D assets, for instance. So definitely, yeah, like Observer is a huge project. And
Yeah.
at some points, more than 40 people worked on it at the same time.
Okay. Wow. So, what? There's a lot of speaking of scary things. There's a lot of fear and doubt among other game developers, particularly independent ones who go like Bloober Team, basically that go from game to game to game. Hoping that one success can build on to the next and then maybe accommodate for a not so much of a success and then keep on staying on. What is the biggest concern with about the game industry right now for Bloober and you as somebody who works on the biz dev side sometimes?
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns. Like one of the huge concerns that I see right now is like the huge impact that the basically the gameplay hours have, like in people's perspective on what is a good game or not. And like we also at one point had like 40 hours a week to play video games, and the more we grow, the less time we have to actually play games. So it corresponded well to horror for us. But the trend, right? So we are doing basically what we do is like shorter games, but more impactful in a way. That's the philosophy. But then again, the trend right now is to have you have a game for 8 hours. Like, okay, if you sell it for more than $10, I won't buy it because it's too much. Because 10 hours is not enough for us. So that's a concern for us, definitely. So the perspective that shifted from basically graphical fidelity, that was the main, I guess, the main symbol of what a good game is. So the better graphics you had, the more AAA you were.
Yeah.
So I think it shifted to gameplay time, and when we do games, shorter games, we have to go into that older audience, I guess, people who work. But then again, it's not such a huge concern for us, basically, as a company, as we like our main target is more mature, as we do horror games. However, that's kind of an interesting trend that I think a lot of developers have to have in mind while developing games right now. But the other thing is, like, there's a lot of going on right now. People streaming whole games. So the smaller developers basically are always afraid that, why will I play a single player game if I've seen everything on YouTube? And that's a concern for a lot of people. And, we were concerned about that as well. However, we decided to think very open-minded at it. And when we started promoting Layers of Fear, we were a company that was not too well known. So what we did is basically we reached out to streamers, basically to YouTubers, to Twitch players, streamers, to smaller ones, because the larger ones not necessarily wanted to talk to us, and also the larger a YouTuber is, probably the more requests for playing his game he gets. So it's understandable, and so we started small, and the community grew very, very fast, from the smallest of YouTubers that had a 5 people following. That started playing our games right at the very beginning. At one point, PewDiePie played a game, Markiplier played a game. So it was very, very cool for us that we started very small and humble and just grew to that to get that attention from those people who literally get 500 requests a day to play their game. So that was cool. But I think like it worked for us as a marketing source. But then again, for a lot of people, it just won't work that way. Like they will be afraid that someone's gonna see their game, so why should they buy it?
Yeah. Well, if I could ask real quick, sorry to interrupt, but for Layers of Fear and for Observer, did you actually see a sales bump when a big YouTuber picks it up? Because I've heard different things.
I think there were small spikes, but it also depended on the streamer himself. Like I would say, like the audience of the streamer. Sorry, it's probably more precise.
Okay.
So those streamers who actually are well known and they have a specific audience. They're not having a laugh on their streams, but they want to say something through their stream, for instance, be more educating or whatnot. I think that we had more spikes while those people play the game. However, big names also gave us a spike, and like I don't remember the numbers right now. It wasn't huge. Like we didn't sell like 100,000 copies after PewDiePie played the game. However, we've seen the spikes, and they were satisfactory for us. But then again, it's very hard to distinguish from time to time who actually made the difference. When we've been sending out review keys, we've been giving them out to a lot of people at the same time. So some of them started playing at the same time. So we obviously seen an increase in people buying the game. But then again, we couldn't physically distinguish from whom actually the spikes went up. But I think working with streamers is a reality that we live in right now. And both the developers and streamers actually to keep on going and keep on working have to find a good spot to work with each other and not to feel that they're they're only business partners. Like a lot of people that we've been giving out keys and talking, we still talk to them. Like it's not okay, we're gonna give you a key and you play the game, we'll be happy, you'll be happy, and that's cool. But there are a few streamers that I've personally kept contact with, and from time to time we just chat with each other. I have a few ongoing invitations to jump into a Discord channel of a streamer, like whenever I want, because it's always cool to have a developer around. And it's always cool for the developer to actually talk to someone's community and say, hey, hi, we're here, we can talk with you through those people, but we can talk to you. So let's do a AMA right here and right now. So it has its ups and downs. I think like the most important thing is right now in the industry is to figuring out like who can help you and why can he help you, but also how can you help them? Because if we don't work with each other, like it won't work probably at some point. So I think like we need to be knowledgeable about what people do and what we do and how can everyone gain from that. And basically the people who earn from this the most are actually the players who get really cool products and they can talk to people who make games which they really, really love, right?
Yeah. When I asked you your biggest concern about the game industry, like I kind of just automatically assumed that Steam discoverability, Steam Direct, Indiepocalypse, terms like that might come up. Is that something like are the things that you talked about more of a concern than like the market getting inundated?
I think it will correct itself. Like there was a huge crackdown in the video game industry a few years ago. Like it might actually come to that. Like, it's so easy to make games right now that a lot of people do them. But I think there will be a moment when people realize that if, as developers, you don't put enough work to the game, then it just won't sell. Like, and also the players will be more thoughtful of what they buy. Instead of seeing a banner, okay, I like this banner, I'm gonna buy it. There are players like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's gonna correct itself. It won't be an easy time, but I think those people who create games, the developers who actually have an idea of what they want to do, and not wanting to make a just earn money from doing bad things, like doing crappy games just because they can, and they can earn some amount of money of that. So being mindful of what you want to do might help you preserve on the market. But yeah, definitely for those who are starting right now, it might be a very difficult time to actually get to the media attention, for instance. Like, you really have to have a product that stands out. So my advice to those people is just think about your USPs, which is the unique selling proposals of your projects. So if you have something very cool and very interesting, and furthermore you have something to show of that idea, like a trailer or even a screenshot or two that have this soul and feeling to it, then I think you're good. You'll eventually be able to find people interested in this project, and it will just go further and further. So I think it will correct itself. Of course, it's a problem, but all of the industries had problems like that.
Yeah. When was it ever easy? Anyway.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be something else. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good stopping point, and I'm kind of half looking at what Alex is doing.
This is real good. This is not
now this is interesting because Bryant, like the hour playthrough that I went through with Bryant was different from this. So, folks, if you're watching this, I mean, maybe I just missed something, but this is different from the first time that we played it. So
yeah, this isn't scary at all. This is great. It's like kind of like an Earthworm Jim level. This is great. I just hang out here.
That's a Alice in Wonderland.
First time I've heard Earthworm Jim connected to Observers. That's awesome.
In a good way, though. Only in the best way.
Got Bloober Team's Earthworm Jim sequel out now. No, the game is actually Observer from Bloober Team. And Rafal, thanks a lot for taking some time to join us today from Poland. And again, I'm Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra. Alex Waro is stuck in some kind of parallel universe.
Yeah, so while I'm stuck here...
we're going to have this archived, and it's going to be up on Gamasutra. We're going to feature it again in case you missed any of it. And please do follow us and come back again for developer-facing interviews. Okay, I think that's it. Did I do that right?
That's perfect. Rafael, thank you so much. And we will see
you no problem. I hope I didn't rant too much. I
didn't rant too much either.
Yeah. No, you guys are great.
Great.
Let's get out of here. Everybody have a great weekend. Take it easy. Bye.